Zero Hedge posted a very interesting chart on Twitter today, and it was plotting the relationship, or the correlation, I should say, because I don't want to say there's a direct relationship, the correlation between non-farm payrolls and consumer spending, retail spending. And it was showing that it was pretty tightly correlated. And it, non-farm payrolls steadily go up, retail spending steadily goes up. It makes sense. People get jobs, they earn money at those jobs, and then they take that money and they go out and they spend in the retail economy. Makes sense. To the same extent, it also makes sense that in 2020, when we saw a sharp decline in non-farm payrolls because people lost their jobs, millions of people lost their jobs, well, retail sales also plummeted, although retail sales did not plummet as much as non-farm payrolls. People kept spending, and in fact, not only did their spending only drop off a certain bit, it very quickly shot up higher than it had ever been, or higher than it was before, prior to people being laid off, and way beat trend. We're way above the retail spending trend, meaning that given the rate at which retail spending was growing before the whole disaster of 2020 and all the lockdowns and everything, retail spending was growing at a rate that would have set it to be much lower than it is right now. So retail sales is way outperforming the trend. And likewise, in the opposite direction, non-farm payrolls are way underperforming the trend. And so there's this big gap. There's a wide delta between non-farm payrolls and retail spending on this chart. And so what fills that gap? Why is there such a big gap when we see such a tight relationship between retail spending and non-farm payrolls? Understandably, you would think, well, less people have jobs, so they can therefore spend less money. They have less, they're producing less, they're earning less, so how can they spend so much? Well, obviously, it's the result of stimmies. First, handed out by Donald Trump. They even had Trump's name on them. He signed every check. Personally, I'm told. And then now we have less stimmy checks, but still some, coming from Joseph Robinette Biden. And so this chart illustrates the problem, or the problem of the stimmies and how you can't just stop them. They can't just go away because the job market has not recovered. People, businesses that were destroyed last year during the lockdowns aren't coming back. We have a lot of, corporate jobs that have come back, but small businesses that were put out of business can't just hire everybody back. They're gone forever. You hear New Yorkers talk about all of the small stores, all the non-chains, all the restaurants on their block. They're all gone. And this is true across America. There are lots and lots of businesses that are gone and never coming back. Now, where I live here in Florida, we've seen less of that. We were far less affected since we didn't really have much of a lockdown. We had restaurants closed for a month or so here. But other than that, most of our businesses have thrived. But that's not true across the country. And so these retail sales are not supported by a recovery in employment. Sure, employment has recovered since the lows of last year, but it's not recovered nearly enough to bring to support retail sales even at trend, let alone the levels of retail sales that we're seeing now way above trend. And so what you would expect then is that unless stimmies continue, unless more stimmies are coming down the pike and coming soon, these jaws will close, so to speak. And it won't be because employment shoots up to meet retail sales, although I guess I should say that's possible. But what do you think is more likely? Do you think it's more likely that employment shoots up to the moon to reach this above trend retail sales level? Or do you think that it's more likely that retail sales will plummet down to the level where employment is currently at, well below trend? For now, we don't have to answer that question. There's still time, even though it's been a while since there's been a new stimmy check. And the reason for that is because, as Zero Hedge also points out, credit standards are incredibly loose right now. Credit standards have plummeted over this same period. Since 2020, they spiked up real high. Credit card companies, they were tight, and they said, you know what, we don't want to issue credit cards to people right now. It might be a little risky, since this is unsecured debt. These are revolving lines of credit. The only thing, backing them, the only collateral you're putting up really is your reputation, your credit score. But since the peak last year, credit standards have plummeted, and now people are able to very easily go out and get credit. They're able to qualify for big lines of credit, and so folks have replaced their stimmies with credit cards, and that's what's currently filling the gap. Now, how long can that go on? I don't know. But it can't go on forever. We know that. People run out very quickly when they are trying to pay for a loss of income by using credit cards. That is not a good, it's not even a good medium-term strategy, let alone a good long-term strategy. Sure, you can make it a couple months running up your credit card, but once you've racked up a lot of debt, the credit card man comes a-knocking. And he says, you know what, I'm not going to lend you any more money until you pay back what I've already lent you. And then at that point you go, I thought I would have a new stimmy by now. I actually don't have any money. I don't have a job. I have no way of paying you, credit card man. And then the credit card man says, I've been had. That's it for you. I'm taking away your card. You are canceled. And if that happens to everybody, then they really have no way to continue this incredibly above-trend retail spending. Retail spending will have to plummet back down to earth unless there are lots of new stimmies. I mean, what we hear lots about in Washington right now are fake infrastructure deals that are just, about taking away our freedom. We don't hear a whole lot about new stimmies, about free money. And the enhanced unemployment benefits, which are going to expire themselves at some point, a lot of red states have denied to their citizens. And so in those states, I would expect there's a lot of consumer credit. There's a lot of credit card debt being racked up, even more than in the blue states, since they're not getting as much welfare and people don't want to work. It's not that there's a shortage of jobs, at least where I live. Everybody's hiring. And folks are willing to pay a lot of money. If I wanted to quit my job right now, if I didn't have a personal relationship with my employer, I would, I could go and get a job making a lot more money somewhere else. It's a great time to be unemployed where I live, because you can go out and have your pick, and people don't care people probably don't even care if you graduated high school. They just need somebody, as long as you can, not even write your own name, as long as you can string a sentence together and follow basic instructions, you can get a decent paying job. Now, that job doesn't pay well enough for you to be able to live here. No, I don't mean that. I mean, it's not that good a pay. You'd have to be making real big bucks in order to really afford to live in at least this part of Florida, in any of the parts of Florida that are growing. So as far as I'm concerned, the clock is ticking, and nobody in Washington seems to really be paying attention to this. The stimmy checks were incredibly important, not only as far as contributing to inflation is concerned. The stimmy checks had a lot to do with the inflation we're seeing. But, the inflation is a side effect of the stimmy checks trying to levitate the domestic consumer economy. Because remember, our economy is mostly consumption here. There's not a whole lot of production that goes on in the United States. And so, therefore, if people here aren't consuming, well, then their precious GDP that the folks in Washington and Wall Street worship so much, it's going to crumble away. I believe officially the recession last year lasted a mere 2 months as far as the government is concerned. What happens if we go into another recession? Would we consider that to be a second recession, or would we say, you know what, we were in a recession this entire time. In fact, we were in a depression, but that depression was masked by stimmy checks and other active measures. What if we're just at the very beginning of a long depression, one which we ultimately cannot avoid simply by printing money? And by printing money, I've talked a lot about the theories that QE is not in fact money printing and what have you. When the government just issues new debt and money is created out of thin air in order to buy that government debt, there's money printing going on. It's debatable as to who is doing the money printing, whether that's the Fed or the primary dealer banks or whoever, but money is being created in order to fund the stimmy checks and everything else that the federal government is doing for the most part. Now, I should note that today, the non-farm payroll report way beat expectations. It was a huge report. It was great. Oh my gosh, so many jobs were created. Yet, this matter of consumption, it still is an issue. We are not back to trend. That is not, or I should say, jobs are not back high enough in order to match consumption. And of course, when we're seeing this recovery, just like with the recovery after 2008, which you have to keep in mind is that the jobs that are being recovered are always on net worse jobs, on average, I should say, maybe, than the jobs that were lost. People are settling for jobs that they are so-called overqualified for. So we'll have to wait and see. Ultimately, if the federal government does have two choices, because they're not going to escape inflation when they're just handing money out to people. When you're conducting literal helicopter money to try and prop up the economy, you're not going to escape inflation. So either they continue to inflate consumer prices by printing dollars to keep consumption up in order to maintain nominal levels of retail sales, or they allow retail sales to collapse down to something that's actually in line with what consumers are earning. And that, of course, will hurt the retail sector. I mean, there's no good options here, and I've been saying this for a while. I don't see any good options. I mean, it's a matter of which hard to swallow pill do you want to take? That's where we're at. So, with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.